Hello everyone and welcome to Tree Huggers, Design as an Agent of Change, presented by Tony Chocolonely for Design Miami Basel 2022. My name is Sujata Burman, I'm editor of London Design Festival, and I'll be hosting today's conversation that will explore creative practices that champion tree conservation as a path towards a more thoughtful built environments that respect and harmonize with the natural ecosystems vital to our planet's survival. Tony's Chocolonely have invited us to do this important conversation to help promote anti-deforestation legislation, in particular the Forest Act, currently pending in US Congress. If passed, this new law will ban the import of certain products that come from lands that have illegally deforested. Tony's Chocolonely is a company focused on raising awareness and eliminating inequality in the chocolate industry. Like our other panelists that you'll meet later on today, I have joining me today Tony's Chocolonely leads by example, building direct long-term relationships with cocoa farmers in Ghana and Ivory Coast, paying them higher wages and working to solve underlying causes of modern slavery. Additionally, Tony's focus is on environmental initiatives, and as they know, they can't be achieved without social justice on a broken planet. Design Miami and Tony's Chocolonely urge voters in the US to contact their representatives and demand the passage of the Forest Act. So joining me today are three creative minds who are championing a similar mission by work in different skills that span architecture, art, and education, from creating vertical forests to temporary ones that inspire by looking at the future and the transformative power of trees. So we have Stefano Boeri, urban planner and professor at Polytechnic University of Milan. He is president of Art and Design Museum Triennale Milano, and his work ranges from the design of architecture and urban visions to product design, with a focus on the geopolitical and environmental implications of the urban phenomena. This leads me to my second panelist, Maria Chiara Pastore, scientific director of Forest Army and associate professor at the Polytechnic University of Milan. Her work includes the research of implementation of an improved green system, which we'll find out more about shortly. My third guest is Es Devlin, an artist who creates large-scale installations and stage sculptures that combine light, music, and language in order to elicit an emotional response and perspective shift in the minds of her audience. Her recent series of temporary forests draws on the Shakespearean tradition of forest as a place of transformation, in which characters enter in one state of mind and emerge having shifted their point of view. So each of these speakers will guide us through their work before we will delve into some questions, and we'll be able to take one or two from the audience as well. So please do send this through the chat box. So we'll kick off with Stefano, who I know was having some slight problems with connection, but hopefully he'll be on now to take us through his work. Welcome, Stefano.
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you greatly.
Great, so I think we can start to share a sequence of images. Well, I don't know if you see them. Okay. So just few words, and I think that we probably are used to forget how plants and trees are important in our life, and we for sure we forget how the balance between the artificial environment that we have built in our, let's say, evolution. This is that we are used to call city, and what still remains of forest. This balance has changed in the last years. So if you could put together all what you see is in a unique part of the emergent land, will know, as you know for sure, will not cover more than the 3-4% of the surface of the planet. And at the same time, we know well how this 3-4% is consuming in terms of energy, natural resources, and how it's responsible for the production of the 75-80% of the CO2 emissions. So on the other hand, on the other side, forests are covering basically the 33-34% of the emergent land of the planet, and that we know well how they contribute to the life of all the species of the planet, and how they for instance, contribute to absorb another part of that CO2 emission that cities are producing. So I think that this balance is very important, and it's so paradoxical that we have completely forgotten how the life of a species started only in a very, 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 very short time in relation with the life of plants and the life of trees. And we forgot also how plants are, let's say, necessary for our life. If we know how city trees work, putting together the light of the sun and underground water, and how they are able to free oxygen and absorb and keep carbon, we know that this kind of natural technology, because it's a natural technology, it's, let's say, for our life, and how much we should do our best to, let's say, implement and defend and protect the role of forest, the role of woodland all over the world. So I think that what we had to do is also in the art field, in the architectural field, is in a way to, let's say, not forget, not oblivion how much plants are fundamentally important and crucial in terms of survival of our species. And in a certain way, all what we have done, the video that you have shortly seen is an image of how Joseph Boyd in Castle in Documenta 1981, when he was capable to, let's say, transform 9,000 Basel stone in 9,000 oak trees, and starting to plant oak trees over the castle and changing, transforming the city with this kind of green metamorphosis. So I'm used to say that we have, let's say, conditioned by a kind of green obsession of our work. We started to work 20 years ago with my colleagues and collaborators in the architectural field, and that this green, let's say, main reference, what we have done at different scale in different parts of the world. More in specific, maybe you can go to the next image. More specific, pronto, yeah. Probably this is one of the result of this green obsession, which is a construction in Milano, basically 10 years ago, of the first two vertical forests. So these two buildings host 21,000 plants of more than 85 different species. But what makes these two buildings, I believe, still relevant and still, let's say, useful also as case study, as experiment, is that these 21,000 plants are hosted in a very small surface condition. It's not more than 1,500 square meter. So it is a powerful ecosystem that combines plants, insects, birds, and humans in such a small surface. It's capable to absorb CO2, to absorb the dust of urban pollution, to produce oxygen. It's also capable to cut the consumption of energy, because it's so capable to shadow the surface of this facade in summertime, and so it's avoiding to use conditioner to the air inside Paris. So there are so many advantages that have pushed us to develop and to multiplicate this kind of, let's say, experiment in different parts of the world, trying always to improve, to let's say, also to learn from the mistakes or that we have done with the first prototype. I can show you some of the, let's say, last exemplar, or the last declination of vertical forest. And probably this is one of the most, let's say, important for all of us, because it's a social housing vertical forest. So it's a social vertical forest which has a very, very low cost in terms of construction, renting. Is now inhabited by more than 150 students, couples that are using it, and that thanks to what we have done in terms of studying how we can transform the first prototype in a model that could be standardized and used in prefabrication. So this let's say, variation on the theme of vertical forest is something that we we are very proud to have done, because it's a confirm that this kind of a way to do architecture and live in nature, where living nature is not a decoration. Living nature is not an ornamental presence, but it's a basic and mental component of our idea of architecture, possible to become affordable for everybody. But for sure, vertical forest is not the unique way to, let's say, demineralize our urban environments. We need them. We need to have more plants in our cities in order to fight the enemy where in its field. So cities in the 85 of CO2, that's the reason we have to make cities greener and to, let's say, multiplicate all the biological surface in our city. But for sure, we cannot build vertical forests everywhere. So we know very well that the first issue is about forestation, how we can imagine to realize orbital forest, biological and biodiversity across our cities. And this is what we started to do together with many other colleagues, with many other international institutions like FAO, and with whom we do the first Mantua 6 years ago. But this is one of the examples. What you've done is the master plan for the capital of Albania, Tirana, was, let's say, realized in imagining to realize the orbital forest all around the city that is going to be planted. And this is what we're used to do. This is, for instance, the idea to create a system of biodiversity corridor that will cross the South European, North Mediterranean environment landscapes. In a certain way, bring back the idea of Richard Weller, where the hotspot of biodiversity, if together, thanks to this kind of biodiversity, could multiply their advantages, for the our species. But basically, this is only some of the let's say, direction of our work, some of the declination of our green session. And I think that now I can give the floor to Chiara, who is a scientific director project that, as you know, is into plant 3 million plants in the metropolitan of Milano, and that's now coming to become one of the main reference for the entire Italian cities contest. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Stefano. And as he said, this is a great way to move on to Maria Chiara, who is the Associate Professor at Polytechnic University of Milano and is a Scientific Director of Forest Army. So Maria Chiara.
Hello, thank you very much. I also share my slides. I really hope you can see them. So I jump on Stefano's suggestion to have more trees in cities, which is precisely what we are trying to do in Milan and in its metropolitan area. We started this project in 2018 in response to an environmental question, how to tackle environmental pollution, and in particular air pollution within the metropolitan area of Milan and within Pianura Padana, which is an extremely air polluted area. So what to do in order to tackle air pollution? Together with the Città Metropolitana di Milano, Comune di Milano, and many other entities such as the parks, ERSAF, and Fondazione di Comunità, we embarked in this project, planting 3 million trees within the metropolitan area of Milan by 2030. Because we know, and Stefano has already mentioned very, very well, that urban forestry, trees and plants and shrubs are our alliance in order to tackle climate change, create better environment, cutting down CO2 emission, lowering down urbanity island, increase biodiversity, create environmental benefits. What we did was to work on an image that provides the exact figure and exact photography of what was the condition and presence of trees within our metropolitan area of Milan, where 3 million people live eventually. And we established that we had a tree canopy cover, which is the surface of all the trees, the leaves within the metropolitan area of Milan. This is very important map because you see the green spots are the places in which trees are. And it's a map that doesn't show the public trees. It is a map that shows all the trees. It means that even if there are people, private owners, which are planting trees within their gardens, that trees are in this map. And this is important because it provides a very, very important step towards the change. It's not the public trees that make the change, it's all the trees within our city that make the change. The other map that I want to show you is the map of the potential that we created. So in order to map, we need to plant 3 million trees. Where? So what we created, it's a map that shows the potential of the metropolitan area of Milan to host trees. It means that, and this is online at www.forestami.org, you can go to the map and see whether the trees can be planted. This is very important because it involves the people and it involves the knowledge, the shift on it. So you can go and see whether the trees can be planted within agricultural field, within parking lots, within streets, in all the places that are available from the planting availability. But trees, there are many, many projects that we are developing. We are very proud. We have been planted more than 330,000 trees in up to now. We are like a long challenge ahead. But what I want to show you more, it's the involvement of the people. So the theme is tree huggers. The theme is people at the center of this transformation for us. So Forestami is much entailing and engaging people because people need to be at the center of this change. We work with institutions, we work with municipalities, we work with people, we work with the companies, all together with a vision, changing and increasing the number of trees within the metropolitan area of Milan. This is important in 2 dimensions. First of all, when you plant a tree, you plant it for yourself, you plant it for the community, you plant it for the future. But also, if you plant the trees, you know what you are doing. And what we are working also is to provide information on what the trees are, why the trees are there, why it is so important to have trees in our places. And I just want to come up with a very small project that we launched this March. We gave 3,000 small trees to the people. Those people will keep this plant in custody for 8 months. So they will keep them in their balconies, in their terraces, in their spaces. And then in November, they will come back with the trees, hopefully alive. And then we will do a campaign in which we will plant the trees. Why it is so important? Because we want to shift from the idea that we have green spaces to the idea that these green spaces are populated by poplars, cherry blossom trees, and all the kind of species. I'm sorry, I don't know them in English, I know them in Italian. So I won't elaborate much more on that, but to shift the idea that these are living species and they need care, they need attention. And when they go back to their natural environment, this is a very cultural shift that we want to disseminate in our environment. So we very much push towards providing this information, providing knowledge to the people, and we plant with every people new trees within our metropolitan area for the environmental reason, but to change and to promote the change for the present and for the future of our metropolitan areas of Milan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Chiara. And my next guest, who is bringing these ideas to life in a more conceptual and artistic way, is Es Devlin, who's going to take us through her recent projects.
Thank you so much. Well, firstly, what an honor to be sharing this panel with some of my heroes here. Maria Chiara, it was so exciting to hear those steps that you're taking. It just gives me so much hope. And Stefano, you are, one of my great heroes, our mutual friends. Talks so much, Hans Ulrich, about your work. And it's something I've been following. I actually just saw your extraordinary vertical forest in Milan the other day in person for the first time. So much of what I'm doing is very much inspired by the two previous speakers. I'll just share screen now. Allora. So it's actually Hans Ulrich Obrist at the Serpentine who invited me, I guess around 4 years ago, to take part in his Do It project. And it was really a project inviting various artists and designers to write a set of instructions. I think, Stefano, you may have done one as well. And the instructions that I started to consider were, could we look at these gas exchange mechanisms that we see around us in trees and the gas exchange mechanism that we carry around us within our lungs, and just undertake a little exercise of observing the common denominators between them. So I started tracing over the bronchial trees that we each carry within us in our lungs, and tracing over the trees that were near me in my home in Southeast London. And of course, I began to realize that there's an obvious reason why they would look the same shape, is because the most efficient way to exchange gas is to maximize your surface area. So of course you would bifurcate and fractal form in order to maximize your surface area. It makes perfect sense. But once you know it and you see it and you draw it, then you can't unsee it. You can't unremember it. And you make that connection. So everything that the previous two speakers have been talking about comes to you from within as well as from without, comes to you from a sense of self as well as from a sense of understanding and learning. So I wrote this short little exercise, which I'll read out now, actually. Find a photograph of two trees. Find an X-ray image of the two bronchial trees within a pair of human lungs. Trace over both. Overlay the two tracings. Contemplate the visual connection, the bifurcating geometry that defines both, the structures inside us that allow us to breathe, the structures outside us that render the air breathable. As you breathe in, visualize the 600 million alveoli like leaves on the branches of the bronchial trees within your lungs. As you breathe out, visualize the stomata on the leaves of the 3 trillion trees which make your breathing possible. If you have $8, go to www.institutaterra.org and plant a tree. Think of it growing as you breathe. So it seemed important to put a call to action to our colleague Sebastião Salgado's reforestation project. So I began drawing these systems and finding my way towards a project that might help people feel this connection and not just know it in their brains, but feel it. So I began to draw some maze forms and to imagine, could I extrude these bifurcating geometries into an architecture that you could feel along all the edges of your body. So you'd start to sublimate the edges of your body into this understanding of geometry. And this resulted in a maze, which was built in Miami just over a year ago at the new Super Blue Art Center with Pace Gallery. And it starts with a film. The film perforates and opens into this maze, and people play in it. And hopefully people come away. The text that I just read you is part of the film that everybody who goes there experiences. And was the first exercise for me really in how could I make this connection felt as well as understood. And I came out of that project thinking, well, I now want to work directly with some trees. And the next iteration along this train of thought was an invitation from the London Design Biennale to take over Somerset House in London, the large courtyard. And Jonathan Riki, the artistic director, took me around and said, look, you can really do anything here. The only thing that's stipulated in the absolute laws since the Enlightenment architecture of this period for this building is that you mustn't ever put any trees in this courtyard. So of course that was very easy to respond to. And we filled it with as many trees as we could. There's, I think, about 423 here. And the point of this was, having studied literature and considered the role of forests in Shakespeare and various other myths and poems, was if you enter a forest and you get lost and you are surrounded by all the transformative power of the phytoncides that we know have been proven to alter our state of mind, to de-stress us, to alter the waves, neuroscientifically, the waves along which we think. We know that these things are not fantasy, they're all real, but these poets intuited it, artists intuited that a long time ago. So the concept of this piece was that you would enter and discover the circle in the middle, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There was a presentation of each of those 17 goals, and you would emerge having engaged with those through the forest. And it had a very special feeling to it. Brian Eno has been collecting bird sounds throughout the world and throughout the day, and he made the soundtrack of the birds from dawn till dusk, which actually, without the soundtrack, it felt like a collection of trees. As soon as the birds were there, it became a forest. And then on to the next iteration of that, I had read the extraordinary Richard Powers novel, The Overstory, where, as you will know, he takes the 700-page American novel and repopulates it so that the prime protagonists in the story are trees. The humans are the subplot, the heroes, and the main narrative protagonists are the trees. And it takes about 3 chapters before, as a human, you really are able to properly engage with the story. You have to adjust your sense of pace. You have to adjust the scale of time at which you're used to learning things. And I thought, in Glasgow, this project that I'm showing here was in Glasgow at the Climate Change Conference, COP26 last year. And it was an invitation from the New York Times to create an environment for them to host their talks. So we thought, well, what if we created a conference of the trees in parallel to the conference of the parties? So there was a tree representing each of the 197 countries that attended, and talks were given on the stage by Greta Thunberg and Al Gore and various others. And actually everybody commented that the quality of talks was very different. The quality of air was very different. You know, the phytoncides could be felt, the quality of air shifted, and people spoke in a different way. You're about to get a piano accompaniment of my son next door. I might have to tell him, give me 1 second, sorry.
That's fine. I feel like it actually lent itself to the kind of...
He didn't want to stop at all. He wanted to perform for you. So then at the end of the year, coming back to Miami, having made the Super Blue piece I showed you earlier, it seemed really important to really work with trees and not just talk about them, but work with them. So this is Jungle Plaza in the Design District. And in this case, we did the project the other way around. While in Somerset House, we had made the project and then found a home for the trees. And of course, the project mercifully was carbon neutral. We were able to, do the maths and figure out that all the costs implicit, the carbon emission costs implicit in transporting them were able to be outweighed by the planting of the trees in the boroughs of Islington and Southwark afterwards. For Miami, we went about it a different way. And we first went to Million Trees Miami, who, again, like Maria Chiara, are working to raise the urban tree canopy cover in Miami from 19% up to 26%. I believe Tampa is 36%. And this particular area of Miami is very much an urban heat island, which really, really needs that extra urban tree canopy cover. So in this case, we actually put in 2,000 plants across this whole site, and then replanted them in various areas of Miami. And we chose the species based on precisely which were most needed. And really the point of this work was to help those who visited to learn the names. I spoke the names as you went around this labyrinthine sculpture. which was also made out of stretch fabric, which was all donated to a theatre company afterwards to keep, you know, the footprint, and very, very little on the project actually was wasted. But yeah, the idea of it was that you would go away having paid the respect to each plant to learn its name, because it does shock me and myself, you know, that I will walk through a forest without knowing the names of the trees I'm passing. So that was really the spirit of it. And actually, I've discovered lately that if any of you, you may not have a tree identifying app, but if you now just if you happen to have an iPhone, if you point it at any leaf or any piece of bark actually on a tree, and take any photo, it will quite quickly, when you look at the photo, offer you an identification of that plant. And in conclusion, I do think that step one towards really caring enough to make the change that we need to make and to repopulating our cities with trees is not only to know in our heads that we need to do this, but to feel it in our guts, because we understand that we are part of the biosphere, that trees and we are part of the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ez, and Stefano and Maria Chiara. I was really intrigued by all of you mainly talking about the fact that it's the people and the public that's going to make this change. And I'm just taking it back to you, Ez. We were discussing before about how people engage with your works. You know, there's the interactivity. How do you make them feel it in the gut? And how have you found audiences engage with your works? And, you know, what's the response?
Well, you know, it was a big shift for me because I had been working very much with connection through music, connection through speech, drama. I had been working in theatre, opera, large-scale pop concerts. And what I found is that those 4 projects that I just showed you, I guess I was nervous at the beginning that a kind of heroic protagonist, like a pop star, would be required to bring these spaces to life. But the trees really do present themselves as the heroes, as they do in Richard Powers' great novel, The Overstory. And there was nothing to be afraid of. People are really ready. I think they're really ready to have their perspective shifted and to recognize the beauty, the power, the urgency of trees. Yeah, everybody felt ready for it, I think.
Yeah. And Stefano, I mean, with the work of Forest Army, do you feel that's the same response? I mean, there's around 1.3 million people in Milan. Do you feel like you're going to be able to engage them in this conversation and them appreciate the wonder and have trees as equals in a sense?
Well, no, I'm sure that we will be successful, and it's a crazy challenge because we believe, first we believe in trees. I think Es was really great in explaining how this useless separation that you are continuing to propose between us and the living nature, between culture and nature and not human. Well, the tragedy of COVID produced a tremendous shock, but also her separation is over. So we are part of nature. We cannot continue to let's say to invest in this crazy and I repeat useless effort to operation life. So believe in trees, because trees are individual. They have each of them has its own evolution trajectory, its own soul, its capacity to be sensitive, to communicate with the other trees, with the other plants, and with us, and also with the other living species and living subjects. So, and I think we have to have the capacity of our species to be of this necessary, different, and new alliance with trees. I'm used to say we need more trees in our cities, but we need also more inside the forest. We have to take care of forest. That doesn't mean, it means to take care, to experience a part of our life across it.
We may have lost you there slightly, Stefano. But yes, I agree.
Sorry.
Oh, no, don't worry. I agree. We shouldn't be alienated from this, this species, which is, just almost as much as us. And Maria Chiara, I saw the work, you were showing there was a lot with young people, and obviously young people are the future. Do you find that, they've been engaging in this kind of same way and being excited by this?
Yeah, definitely they are. And what we do is to work together with the schools in order to engage either in plantation activity, but also to discuss with them. And among the different activities, we have a school which is called Scuola Forestami, in which we specifically bring the different age of students to the parks to see the trees and to discuss about this, and this is part of the activity. But also we've been doing a lot of dissemination activities and discuss and have webinars with students of different age, and it's incredible how these so my feeling is that they have a consciousness of our environment and the environmental issues. They are very much keen to react. They are very curious to the different challenges that we propose, and very reactive. So my sense is that we are heading to the right direction, in the sense that involving the different age and involving the future generation to this, it's so important, and to provide like a better future that we have it now, and also to work to have more and more information and more people involved in this.
Yeah, and I guess Ez, with a lot of what you were saying as well, in terms of literature, it's things that we're taught in school, isn't it? It's things that kids these days would be engaging with in that kind of literature way. What kind of advice would you give to maybe emerging creatives who are looking to work in this space and deal with these kind of quite complex issues at the same time, with installations and all of that? So what advice would you give?
So I get back to what also Stefano was mentioning. These plants are living species. So if you bring this very simple quote and simple idea, because you tend to consider these as objects because they are fixed and because they react to wind, but they don't move, they don't talk. So it's not, of course, fauna, it's flora. So you have a very different perspective, and also the time in which they grow, it's so slow that it's very hard to perceive the changes in a very short time, but they are living objects. So if you stress the attention on this quote, and you consider that the trees are talking, the trees are reacting on our environment, the trees are helping, they're growing, they can react. In fact, this is a very essential, simple but essential quote to our environment. So that I would put that at the center of the discussion.
I think to add to that, actually, in the wonderful Stefano Mancuso book, which I know is one of your amazing colleagues, who writes about the secret intelligence of plants, he reminds us that it wasn't until the 19th centuries or 1860s that Edward Pfeffer invented or conceived of time-lapse photography. And it was when we first saw the time-lapse of a blossom opening or the time-lapse of some root shooting that we were able more closely to relate to flora as fauna, right? To understand through the lens of fauna that we are, how animate a flora is. We just needed some help to recognize that shift of scale. And, I do think, someone like Attenborough has done so much to help ignite this connection between humans and the rest of the biosphere, because of that extraordinary photography, that extraordinary, exceptional technique of time lapse. So we really begin to understand, the energy with which plants go about their behavior, and we can relate to it more closely. So I do think that's something, as Maria Chiara says, to help young people really make that connection.
And also listening to, as I was thinking that the other very important thing is that they can do without us, we cannot do without them. So it's a very important balance. Now you need to always remember that trees have been there in the past without us. And we cannot do anything without them. So this is a very, very important discussion that we always need to keep in mind as soon as we think, oh, these trees is impinging my parking lots, and so I want to take it down. So maybe that there's no car, there's no us without the tree. So this is a very important statement that I would add to the.
I agree, and what I love about what you're both doing with Stefano as well is that you are beginning to turn the cities. The concept is to turn the city into a forest with people rather than a city with trees, and shift the balance that way round. Because as we know, so many of us will be city dwellers. More and more of us will be city dwellers, and 5 of the largest cities on earth haven't yet been built. And they're going to be built in Africa, and they're going to be built in China, they're going to be built in India. And those cities, even at this point while we're conceiving them, we need to allow the rest of the biosphere to dominate, coexist with humans in those cities, because nature can't be over there. Nature has to be where we are in the cities.
And what you mentioned about cities is interesting because, you're talking here about Miami and then Milan. Each city is very different, and there could be, challenges with bringing these kind of ideas into each city. How would you see about overcoming that? And how could you see with the work of Forest Army, Maria Chiara, move to a different city? And have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's also a very interesting question. Thank you. And Stefano also provided some high hint on that. So what is the cool thing is that at least in Italy, there's a lot of attention to forestami at the moment, as the issue is that we provided scientific information, we built a model, and then we applied it, and then it actually worked. It's working, at least. So what we are doing is not just to provide a study in which we say, oh, urban forestry is important. Then we pass to the action, and we are planting trees. And what we do is to plant and plant and plant for every season. So this is and then what we do also is to get the information on what we do and what we plant back to the scientific sphere, so that we always know and we can monitor and we can provide more information and so on. And this is something that is looked upon, and there are other cities that we discuss, because more than just doing these 2 other cities is to build a network and exchanging knowledge. So it's not that forestami will work exactly in the way, because Miami has maybe a different governance, different money, different orography and so on. So maybe the model is not precisely the one that Miami needs. What is important is, again, the community, to exchange the information, to that Miami knows that what we are doing in Milan can be somehow discussed and then tailor-made to the city as it is and to the different needs that Miami could have. So I think that building the community upon trees, and there are FAO, for instance, is doing, and we are also doing with Stefano again, we organized the first World Forum on Urban Forest that was held in Mantova in 2018, and next year it will be in Washington DC, the second World Forum on Urban Forest, which is a community of people working on forests from different fields and different areas and different backgrounds, coming together, discussing, sharing knowledge in order to build the next generation of project ideas in order to plant more trees, having happier, healthier, and safer environments.
Yeah, and I guess Es is bringing those kind of ideas to different cities as well, with producing the installations in different ways. Es, do you feel like you can see how it can work in different cities? You know, having done the projects in London, done the project at COP, and then Miami as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've learned is you do need to start with the legacy for each project, because remember, I'm responding to a brief. In each of these cases, I'm not being asked to come and do some reforestation at all. I'm being asked to, you know, in one case, launch a new shop, in another case, provide a conference environment, in another case, provide the sort of centerpiece for a design biennale, right? None of those briefs were directly in any way would suggest that the invitation was to do anything like what I ended up doing with them with trees. So what I would say in each case, if you are watching this and you are someone who's invited to make a temporary event and you feel in your heart anxious about the commitment of resources to a temporary event, and you're worried about what happens to those resources and materials after the event, because the temporary events community, I think, is becoming more and more aware of the irresponsibility of putting up something and then taking it down again. The fashion shows, many of the things I've been involved in, as I look at them now with this new lens, I'm like, how do I adjust this? And it's not just me, a lot of us are thinking the same way. Actually, Hans Ulrich from the Serpentine did mention to me the number of artists that he's working with who are now saying, well, actually, I'm just going to make some gardens. You know, the garden will be my artwork. So I don't think it works in every situation, but I think the mentality can transfer that whatever you're making, whether it's a forest or whether it's something else, if you start at the end of it and design its legacy, design what every atom of it will become next, and then pedal back into what it will be. I think that's the sort of circular design economy that Kate Rayworth and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have been guiding us towards, that we are all benefiting from thinking about.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you say about the mentality. It kind of takes me to my last question, and hopefully is more of a hopeful one as we end on Friday afternoon. Stefano, if you're still here, please chime in on this too. But what inspires you now? What gives you hope, Stefano? Starting with you.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question, please.
What inspires you today, and what gives you hope for the future when we're thinking about this topic?
Well, I repeat, it's something that we have to do in every moment of our life, in every place, and well, it's crucial. And I was considering this kind of double movement, so trees toward cities and human toward forests. And this is also, as Es was very well explaining and conceptualizing in her art piece, is a kind of also conceptual and psychological movement. And basically, this is something that we have to try to share. What we do as architects, it's very simple. We try to combine it in nature and our artificial products, and trying to show how makes our furniture, makes our buildings, makes our cities capable to register the change of time. You know what is so exciting of the vertical forest, also for a city, or also, let's say, the forest, the floating forest that we have just done in Milano, is that this environment mirrors the change of time. Day by day, season by season, they change colors, they change dimension. And this is mirroring life. And that's what we have in mind when we work in the direction.
Great. And Maria Chiara, what are your hopes for the future?
So I think that it's a very close answer to Stefano in terms of time. So the idea that you are planting something today and it works for the next 100 years of time is so incredible, no? I mean, our better legacy than changing something for the next 100 years, something that is very much going ahead of us in this sense. And we see forests and trees which are there since centuries. And this is something that it provides me a very enthusiastic and hopeful idea for the future. So that's my good thing, I guess, thinking on trees and shrubs and plants and flowers, some of them lasting for much more than us.
And as taking what Maria Chiara says about the next 100 years, what would inspire you for the next 100 years in terms of creativity around trees and reforestation?
I mean, it's really interesting. I actually was on a panel yesterday with the gorgeous Earthrise studio at the Barbican. And the tone of our talk, although we share all the same concerns as this group, was so much more anxious in that the group and the room were very much younger. And there was a lot of anxiety around cognitive dissonance, really, that, you know, although clearly all of us are hopeful, we all are sort of so, you know, painfully, acutely aware of the dissonance in each, you know, of our actions, in that, you know, yes, we want so much to change everything, and yet we're still so much enmeshed in the things we want to change. So I'm delighted to be on a panel today that was able to sort of move out of that space of dissonance and look forwards. I think it does come down to this sense of, you know, as Roman Kochanek talks about in How to Be a Good Ancestor, or Joanna Macy in World as Lover, World as Self, how to, as a human, really properly, deeply shift our perspective to the extent that we no longer see the edges of ourself as the edges of our hands and fingers and the edges of our faces. We have to, this is only a very recent, and as Stefano says, completely useless and foolish distinction anyway. We have to get back to a sense of self that other cultures and other times had, which was the self, of course, extends throughout the whole network of the biosphere. And that's, I hope I can be part of what Joanna Macy calls the great turning, this turning towards understanding that we are the world, you know, world's consciousness, we are the world knowing itself, but we have to know that we're part of this network. That's my hope.
On that lovely note of consciousness, thank you to all my guests, Stefano, Maria Chiara, and Ez, and thank you for everyone joining this talk. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.